In a world where carbs are your enemy, you need one man to help you fight your battles. That man is Jimmy.
Combating nutrition, disinformation, and general bull. It's Jimmy Rants. JimmyRants.com.
What's up, you guys? Welcome back to another Instagram Live, and we're here with another episode of Jimmy Rants, and it's about to be on, you guys. I hope you really enjoy that you tuned in today to Jimmy Rants, because I've got the rant of all rants today. It's coming. JimmyRants.com is the website. As always, we start off over on Instagram, so go follow me there at Livin' Low Carb Man, LIVIN LOWCARBMAN. Once you are there, you can engage in the content live, just like Randy and Four Dings and Sam all are doing right now. You can also watch it for up to 24 hours on replay on Instagram. After 24 hours, it does disappear from Instagram, but we put all the past episodes up on YouTube. So go type in a keyword search, Jimmy Rants. You will find the show either on YouTube or a Google search. Finally, we have the best of the best moments of this here show in podcast form. And this one today, you guys, is definitely going on the podcast. I promise you. It's at Apple Podcasts as well as Stitcher. JimmyRants.com is the website. Today's Jimmy Rants is all about this article that I had about 6 people send to me yesterday. And so the headline says, this study on nearly 500,000 people has bad news for the keto diet. So this was actually published in Business Insider, and it came out a few months ago, but they recently re-released it with new data. And so I wanted to go through this because this is the kind of nonsense that comes online. People read this stuff and it scares them half to death. And it disgusts me that in the midst of this ketogenic revolution that is going on in our culture, and believe me, it's a revolution. There are people coming to keto in droves. They're very keto curious. They want to know more about how this can lower inflammation and make them healthier. So don't think that any of this stuff is by accident. The powers that be that have ruled the roost in the weight loss industry for so long, they have been having a strong foothold in this conversation. Well, keto has come along and thrown a big old monkey wrench right in the middle of it all, and they don't like that. So they're pulling out all the stops, and we're going to correct a lot of the bad information that they shared in this article. So you guys ready? Here we go. Scientists and dietitians are starting to agree on a recipe for a long, healthy life. They've been on the same page of this low fat, healthy whole grains, exercise till you drop, blah, 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 fruits and vegetables. They've been beating that drum for years. So they're not just stumbling upon this. They have a particular way of eating in mind that they think is healthy, whether the science shows it or not. They have this notion of what they think is healthy, and they're articulating it to patients. They're articulating it to clients, and they're scaring people half to death of doing something that's outside of that paradigm. So let's make that very clear. This is not a new discovery, but they're pretending like it. Here is the grand discovery, you guys. Fill your plate with plants, include vegetables, whole grains, healthy fats, which we'll get back to that here in a minute, and legumes. Do not include a lot of meat. Do not include a lot of dairy or highly processed foods that a gardener or farmer wouldn't recognize. Okay. Fill your plate with plants. There is certainly nothing wrong with eating plant-based foods, especially the non-starchy kind that can keep your blood sugar and insulin levels completely even. But what happens is people say, Oh, well, I've been told to eat more plants, so I start eating a lot of potatoes. Yes, a potato is a plant food. No, it's not necessarily a very nutritious or delicious one without lots of butter on it. Food to be consuming. And so fill your plate with plants is kind of vague. They need to be a lot more clear about what they mean, but they're not being clear by design, as you'll find out. Whole grains. Tell me what I get from whole grains besides broken teeth if I actually ate them whole. Tell me what I get from whole grains that I can't get from other food sources. Anything? No. You can get literally everything that you get in whole grains in other foods that are much more nutrient dense. And yet they want us to fill our plates with whole grains. Healthy fats. So healthy fats, about the only thing we have in common with what they think is a healthy fat is olive oil. They think healthy fat, monounsaturated fat, olive oil is a pretty healthy fat. But they would not agree with keto people who say coconut oil is a healthy fat, butter is a healthy fat, lard, ghee, tallow, duck fat. All of these things are healthy fats in the keto space, but they put down healthy fat. Again, generically healthy fat, and it's code for olive oil, vegetable oils, margarine, that kind of thing. I wouldn't agree with that. And then finally, legumes. So beans. Beans are just starchy, carby protein sources. So no thank you. But that's what they want us to fill our plate with, is vegetables, whole grains, healthy fats, and legumes. And then don't include a lot of meat. Why? What is inherently wrong with meat? This is what I always want to get to the bottom line on. What is wrong with meat? Why would these scientists come together and say, well, we need to not have as much meat? I want to hear why. Meat is the most complete protein you can possibly get on this planet, and yet you want to eliminate that. Don't include a lot of meat. I know there's been a lot of bogus studies talking about so-called cancer properties of eating meat. And of course, a lot of those studies look at grain-fed animals. They look at less quality meats. They tend to throw it in with processed meats, which those aren't the same thing. It's just amazing to me. They always throw this meat thing. Then they throw in milk, which they mean dairy, any dairy product. Again, spurious research looking at the effects of dairy on your health. And then this is the funny one to me. So they said, don't include a lot of meat, milk, or highly processed foods. One of these things just doesn't belong here, right? Highly processed foods. It's silly that they would throw that in with meat and milk. Meat and milk, both very nutrient dense. And when I say milk, because that's what they said, I mean dairy. Nutrient dense, real whole foods is what meat and milk are. Processed food is crappy garbage, as I've described it before. So why in the world would they put it into the same category? And then highly processed foods that a gardener or farmer wouldn't recognize. Guess what? A gardener and a farmer would both recognize meat and milk as real whole foods. Meat and dairy as real whole foods. So let's stop lumping into that same category of what we should not be eating. Meat, milk, and highly processed foods all in the same category. If you're just joining us, we are going over this headline that was sent to me about 6 times yesterday. This study on nearly 500,000 people has bad news for the keto diet. So we're kind of going over it. And the bottom line is they want us to all be vegetarian, vegan, which we've talked about here on this Jimmy Rants before. So the 500,000 people was a global study of eating patterns on 447,000 people around the world. So guys, they did not put all 447,000 people in a randomized control clinical trial, locking them up in a metabolic ward. They didn't do any such thing. What they did was they took old research, okay? Stick with me here because this is an important point about this kind of research that makes big headlines. This was what's called an epidemiological study. So an epidemiological study is where they take a group of studies that have various numbers of people in them, including other epidemiological studies. This is the funny thing. They can make an epidemiological study out of epidemiological research. All that means is they take together all of these different studies, put them all together in one new study, observing what they saw in the various studies, and then making some random conclusion about what that means now. Okay? That's all this was. So they did a study of studies of studies of studies, and it really doesn't conclude anything. They can't make the claim that all of this is verifiable in scientific research until they actually do a randomized controlled clinical trial, which would include a few hundred of these same people put in a metabolic ward for a period of time. And if they don't do that kind of research, this really doesn't mean anything. And yet they got the headline they wanted, right? What they discovered is that no matter where you live or what your daily diet is, banning entire food groups and thinking you can cheat your way into good health might work for a while, but it also will send you to an early grave. Okay. Isn't it funny how when they describe the keto diet, they always describe it as eliminating an entire food group? But when we start talking about low-fat diets, they never talk about eliminating an entire food group there. Isn't that strange? Have you ever stopped to think about how the vernacular of how they describe low-carb keto diets, and they've done that since I've been online. I've been out there 15 years now doing this thing, and they've always talked about eliminating whole food groups. There's no more evidence of eliminating an entire food group than when they've eliminated fat from the diet. And yet that's what they talk about when they talk about keto. Now they get to keto specifically. The popular ketogenic diet, which involves strictly limiting carbs to less than 50 grams a day, no more than 2 whole apples worth, and subsisting primarily on high-fat foods, is one of those restrictive diets that will have harmful long-term consequences. Dun, dun, dun. What are the long-term consequences? Long-term keto eating has consequences? Really? Somebody should have told me that before I started this, by the way. Other low-carb diets that fall into this category include Paleo, Atkins, Dukan, and the Whole30. Nutrition experts say that besides their potential for harm, a real whole foods-based diet has potential for harm. Okay, yeah, we'll go with that. These popular diets are also really hard to follow. What is hard to follow about fatty protein, vegetables, and fat with a real foods-based template? What's hard to follow about that? Nothing to me. Some benefits of going keto are difficult to dispute, though. Following a high-fat, low-carb diet, you can actually produce rapid weight loss and blood sugar control. It's so funny, they always zero in on the weight loss, which gets a lot of people to start keto, and they actually have to acknowledge it does control blood sugar. So my question back to all these idiots that believe this kind of crap about keto is, why does it manage blood sugar? If it's so horrible, why is it producing fat loss? Why is it producing blood sugar control? They never get into the mechanism, because if they did, they would have to admit the insulin lowering effects are a good thing. They would have to admit the inflammation lowering effects are a good thing, but they don't. They never talk about that. It's also good for children who have tough to control epileptic seizures. For decades, people have seen stellar results managing those and other conditions on a keto diet, thanks to medical professionals. But there's limited evidence that going low carb might actually lead people to become less tolerant of glucose and thereby develop type 2 diabetes, ... though more research is needed. Why say that in an article if you know ahead of time that more research is needed to make that claim. You want to know why? They're trying to discourage you away from doing a low-carb ketogenic diet. They want to say it's going to help make you develop type 2 diabetes. Somebody, please tell me how in the world eating a low carbohydrate diet with lots of healthy fats, moderate amounts of protein, with mostly real whole foods, how will it possibly lead to type 2 diabetes? Anybody? Can anybody tell me the mechanism about how diabetes would develop in that context? It doesn't, is the point. Keto is the answer to type 2 diabetes. Again, they don't want you to know that. There's too many forces at work. What we do know, based on carefully conducted lab testing of overweight men, is that going keto probably doesn't help burn more body fat than a regular regimen. See, this is why I correct bad science so often, you guys. Because people are like, well, nobody's paying attention to the science. Here's what happens. One bad scientific study comes out. Then it's quoted by another bad scientific study, which is then quoted by another. And it's this whole domino effect of all these bad studies that lead to some grand conclusion that shows up in some article like this. What they're referring to here, the whole carefully conducted lab testing of overweight men, is keto probably doesn't help burn more body fat than a regular regimen. They actually did a study looking at caloric intake of people that ate keto. Guess what was in that keto diet? 40% of their calories coming from carbohydrate. Would anybody watching this right now that eats keto call that a ketogenic diet? 40% of my calories. So if I'm eating, I'm just going to throw out a random number. If I'm eating 2,000 calories in my diet, 40% of my diet, and I'm doing this on the fly, is what? 800 of those calories, right? And so 800 calories divided by 4, which is the number of calories per gram of carbohydrate, would be 200 grams of carbohydrate. In what universe is that keto? And yet, they're saying carefully conducted laboratory testing has shown keto doesn't produce any more weight loss than any other diet. Well, yeah, if you feed them 200 grams of carbs, for sure. How about you drop it down to 20 grams of carbs and let's run that same test all over again? No, they don't want to do that because they know what's going to happen. It forces people to dramatically curb their sugar intake and kick processed foods to the curb. Why is that a bad thing? Isn't the goal to get people to eat mostly real whole foods? Isn't the goal to get them to lower their amount of sugar intake? Isn't the goal to get them to kick processed foods to the curb? And yet keto does all of that, and yet we want to discourage people away from eating the very thing that's keeping them away from sugar and crappy garbage? Does this make any sense at all that they would discourage people? If their goal is to get people to get off of sugar and get off of processed foods and to eat mostly real whole foods, what the crap is going on here? Are we living in Twilight Zone? I told you guys this is going to be the rant to end all rants today. These are both good habits for overall health and blood sugar control, but they also will help reduce your likelihood of developing cancer. And again, is that a bad thing? Why aren't we celebrating that? It's so funny when you kind of frame keto in your worldview. And I try hard not to do this, you guys, as a big-time fan of keto. I try not to let confirmation bias impact what I say to you guys. I'm always trying to be open to the science. And even they are admitting, hey, look, if you lower your blood sugar levels and you get off of sugar and processed foods, you're actually going to improve your chances against developing cancer. They even have to admit that in this anti-keto article. And why is that a bad thing? Again, let's look at why that's happening. What's the mechanism that would make that happen? Warburg effect, maybe? Maybe you should look that up. He won the Nobel Prize in Medicine for talking about that. But like taking aspirin, eating a special high-fat, low-carb diet probably should not be an everyday habit for otherwise healthy people. Our bodies simply aren't designed to fuel up on fats unless we're literally starving. Okay, I've heard this argument before. Well, ketosis is such an unnatural state. Why would our bodies ever want to stay in that unnatural emergency mode state? I've heard this before. But we're looking at it through the prism of modern day society, where I literally have a store right there. I could go anywhere right now and get food. But what about hunter-gatherer ancestors? What about our hunter-gatherer ancestors from just a few thousand years ago? Hasn't been that long ago in the grand scheme of where we are as a society and where we are as human beings. Our bodies are basically the same as those hunter-gatherers. What did they do? They went long periods of fasting without eating. They ate a whole ton of calories all at one time when they had a big animal kill. And oh yeah, by the way, they went right for the fatty parts of the animal first because they knew that was the most nutrient dense. They knew that's calorically energy dense to go right for the brain, right for all of the fatty parts of the animal. And then they threw away the lean meats. They didn't eat lean meats. Blah. They knew, and yet we celebrate eating lean meats today like it's something big. But that's what they did. And yet they're telling us in this article, it's not an everyday habit because our bodies aren't designed to fuel on fat. You want to bet? I guarantee you my brain will run circles around most people that make this kind of asinine comment. I would run circles around you mentally because of a 75 to 80% fat in my diet. I have never been more calm, Jimmy Rants notwithstanding. I have never had a sharper brain in my late 40s, in my entire life. And all of that is because precisely I'm eating a low-carb, high-fat, ketogenic diet. So it's nonsense for them to put this out here. Low-carb diets make it easy to neglect key nutrients like magnesium, calcium, and potassium that can be plentiful on less restrictive diets with fresh high-carb foods like beans, bananas, and oats. Stop it! Just stop it! Come on! Magnesium, calcium, and potassium. Gee, where can I get all of those micronutrients? Oh yeah, meat and dairy. The very thing you told me to cut out earlier in this article. Meat and dairy has all of those things in great abundance. Great abundance. And if you don't believe me, go read my book, Real Food Keto. In there, we have all the micronutrients and where the food sources are for those micronutrients like magnesium, calcium, and potassium. Every single one of them can be accomplished and put in your body with real whole foods that are not beans, bananas, and oats. They're keto friendly. Again, they don't want you to know this. If you're just joining us, we are talking about this big headline about how bad keto is, and 500,000 people study is proving it, and we're going over it methodically here because we haven't even gotten to the most juicy part, which I have on the pinned comment down there. It's coming, guys. So then they start bringing in other research, okay? So they talked about another research at a conference that looked at self-reported eating of 25,000 people, compared it with all the studies, including this one I've been talking about. They found those who ate a moderate amount of carbs were more likely to live longer than eating a low-carb or a high-carb diet. Well, we talked about that research when it came out several months ago, and it's just silly, some of the conclusions. But here's the conclusion to end all conclusions. Our study suggests that in the long term, low-carb keto diets are linked with an increased risk of death from any cause. And deaths due to cardiovascular disease, vascular disease, and cancer, according to this Polish professor in his study. Okay. Long-term low-carb keto eating leads to death? Then somebody better call me the Grim Reaper now. Because I've been eating this way, low-carb since 2004 or 2005, low-carb, keto, hot and heavy, since 2011. When am I supposed to die? If I'm supposed to have all-caused risk of death due to cardiovascular disease, which I have a family history of, and I'm bucking that trend with epigenetic expression thanks to my keto diet, vascular disease and cancer, when's it supposed to happen? Why aren't I keeling over right now? It's so silly to me that they put out this kind of sensationalism is the only word I can think of, and propaganda, quite frankly. And yet, it shows up in articles just like this. And so they go on to talk about other studies that have shown the same thing that they're seeing in these other, and all of those studies, epidemiological studies, observational studies, where they're looking at data, and it's so washed out, they can really interpret it to mean anything at that point. It can be tricky calculating the precise kind of diet that leads to a long life, and part of the problem is we don't live our lives in a highly controlled lab. Yeah, thank God. Until that day arrives, we all become well-studied lab rats. We have to rely on long-term observational data. No, we do not have to rely on long-term observational data. Observational data is only good for one thing: hypothesis gathering. So if they want to look at observational data, you cannot make any human application conclusions about observational data. All observational data is, it lets you come up with a theory that you can then test in a randomized controlled clinical trial. Until that happens, do not tell me that all we have to rely on is observational data. And then they say, usually in the form of surveys. Quick survey with you guys. What did you eat 8 months ago exactly today? Go. What'd you eat? Go. What did you eat? Oh, I'm sorry. You don't know? You have no idea what you ate 8 months ago on this exact day? Well, that's what they're asking these people to do on these surveys. Tell us exactly what you ate 8 months ago, 7 months ago, 3 months ago. Heck, I'll even go to last week. Do you remember what you had this exact day last week? Maybe you do, but most people don't. And yet, that's where they're coming up with this data. That's how they come to this conclusion. To know more about which diets are the best long-term, study after study, survey data from around the world shows that people who stick to limited meat, dairy, and processed foods while fueling up on fiber-rich plant-based foods like vegetables, whole grains, nuts, and even the carb-heavy beans have some of the best health outcomes. They describe their diets as being rich in whole foods. Hey, my diet is rich in very whole foods, and right now I'm only eating a keto carnivore diet. I'm only eating animal-based foods. And mine is very nutrient-dense. Mine is full of real whole foods as well. So why are we throwing out the real whole food-based dairy? Why are we throwing out real whole food-based meats? They pretend like the only whole foods that are out there are vegetables, whole grains, nuts, and beans. Want to bet? And I guarantee you, I'm far healthier than all of those people who promote that kind of a diet. So the healthiest people around the world consume whole grain rice, not white. They eat plants like fruits and vegetables, not fruit juice or smoothies. Because of the intact fiber, you have a lot more nutrients, which I agree with them. It is definitely more nutritious to have the whole form of those kinds of things. But fiber ain't the be-all, end-all, by the way. So they focus in on the fiber. They say the highest fiber foods are very high in carbohydrates like beans, peas, and sweet fruits. It's not a very common pattern to eat very low carb, strictly plant-based. At least in the Western world, it tends to be more animal-based. That just is what it is. Well, My Keto Talk co-host, Dr. Will Cole, wrote a whole book about how to do a very low carb, very high fat, plant-based keto diet called Ketotarian. So go check that out. Some of these excuses that they've given you guys about why people can't eat keto, they're not thinking outside the box. They're really not paying attention to what's going on in the culture. Will's book has been selling like crazy, Ketotarian, and people are very interested in it that aren't really big fans of meat. And that's okay if you're not a big fan of meat. Have a little bit of fish, a little bit of eggs with your plants and make it mostly lowish carb, higher fat, and you can do this pretty well. People on low-carb diets, though, often turn to more butter and meat for sustenance, which will increase blood pressure and contribute to cancer. No, it does not. We've seen study after study, and I encourage the people that wrote this cockamamie crap in Business Insider, I encourage you to look up the work of Dr. Will Yancey. He is a researcher in the Triangle area of North Carolina, and he did a study several years back now, I want to say about 10 years ago, that concluded, and it was a spontaneous reading, you guys, it concluded that one of the best ways to lower your blood pressure through nutritional change is a ketogenic diet. It does. And the mechanism of that is probably linked to the inflammation lowering effects. It's probably linked to the insulin lowering effects. So it's nonsense to put out there, which we know will increase blood pressure. No, it does not. And this whole idea of contribute to cancer, come on. Enough of the hyperbole. Let's get real. And I'm going to call you out on Jimmy Rants and not apologize for it. Meat and dairy contributes to inflammation in the body. No, it does not. No, it does not. You can't just speak that into existence and make it true. Meat and dairy are not going to increase inflammation in the body. If that were true, it would need to show up in my high sensitivity C-reactive protein. And literally, that's all I'm eating right now is meat and animal-based foods. That's all I'm eating. And my HSCRP is way low. So if meat and animal-based foods were the reason for inflammation going up in the body, would it not show up in an actual blood test? And don't you dare say, well, you're just an anomaly. Yeah, I'm an anomaly, all right. Replicated by millions of people that are doing keto. And this higher inflammation will help cancerous tumors form and grow. You're right. Higher inflammation does do that. Guess what does that better than anything else? Increasing inflammation in the body. It's two things: carbohydrate and vegetable oils. Two of the staples of these more plant-based diets. So thank you very much. I'm going to stick with my meat and my animal foods and stay happy and healthy for a very long time. I am. I don't need that. The new scientific findings all support what parents, trainers, and coaches have been saying for years. Eat less junk. Agree with that. Continue to be skeptical of the latest miracle diet. I agree with that. But what are they referring to? Be it keto or any other passing fad. Really? I told you guys, be ready for the rant to end all rants today, because that was a bunch of bullcrap. All right, let's see what you guys have to say. Welcome in, welcome in. I know that was a little bit longer than it normally is, but I wanted to go over this because so many people sent me that article. I just had to go off on a rant today. It's what we do here on Jimmy Rants. Bailey, oh my gosh, I had someone, quite a few, tell me this yesterday. Also had a girl comment on my post saying I should be eating sugar because the brain needs glucose. Oh, it is so funny, the things that people believe, assuming that you can't get glucose from other sources besides eating sugar. Yeah. Tall redhead, Big Agro wants us to eat whole grains. Well, they make me sick, so I don't want to eat them. No. And you're right, they do want us to eat more whole grains. It's why it's so funny that the USDA, United States Department of Agriculture, is the one in charge of our dietary guidelines. Do you stop and think about that ever? the USDA, whose role in our government is to push healthy whole grains on the public. And yet they're the ones in charge of setting up dietary guidelines for Americans. Let's get the big bad wolf to set up all of the parameters for how the three little pigs live their life. And that's basically what they've done. Charm City Polly says, I have friends that say you need sugar for brain health because it needs glucose to work properly. And they're exactly wrong. You don't need sugar to fuel your brain with glucose. You can get glucose. I'm about to rock your world, Polly. You can get glucose from the protein and the fat that you consume on your ketogenic diet. Gives you all the brain glucose that you'll ever need. And here's the thing too. Some people freak out because they have a higher blood sugar reading in the morning when they go keto. Guess what that is called? That is called a glucose sparing effect. So for all those people that think you need to eat 130 grams of carbohydrate, mostly sugar, to fuel your brain, when you have a higher blood sugar in the morning, guess where that glucose that's in your blood when you test, guess where it goes pretty quickly in the morning? Right there. And so it's going to go to all the glucose-dependent functions in the body, which there are a few, including in the brain. But most of your brain is fat. Upwards of 60 to 70% of your brain is fat. So don't you want to be fat-fueled so your brain functions at optimal level? The answer is yes. Yes, you do. Thank you for answering my messages. You're welcome, Ketoholic, anytime. Rat Dog Finney says, as Sean Baker says, current health is indicative of future health. Will you live longer? God doesn't give us that answer, but at least you'll live better and feel good. Yeah, that's the goal of all of us, I think, in this health space right now. Russ says, if cows eat grass and I basically just eat cows, then that makes me almost vegetarian. Yeah, I tell people I love plants so much. I just love and adore plants, plant-based foods. I just love them. So therefore, I'm not going to eat them. That would be cruel. That would be inhumane to eat plants. So I'm not eating any plants because I love plants to death. I do. I love them. So I'm just going to eat meat. That's the way I roll. Liver is the most nutrient-dense food ever, says Alberto. You're right. Grains are good. Yeah, right. Kimberly says, are we all dying? My Nana used to say, each day we live is another down. I ate sad for 40 plus years. Now I'm keto for life. Yeah. It is funny how they talk about, oh, lead to death. Well, there is 100% mortality rate. Every single person watching this right now, you will eventually die. I know it's morbid to think about, but you will. But what we're talking about here is length of life and quality of life to get to the end of life. I don't know about you, but I want to live happy, healthy, totally cognizant. I can just imagine 80-year-old Jimmy Moore and still have this sharp brain that I have now. I want that. That's my goal. No matter what my body looks like, what my body ends up as, I want a sharp brain late in life. To me, that'll be a win. They want everybody to stay sick, says the healthy bishop. Lies, 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 and more lies. Keep preaching keto. Oh, I will. You know I will. I love your work, by the way, healthy bishop. You do a great job. You guys go follow him. Liars should be ashamed, but they are bought out. Yeah, Ketoholic, sadly. Sadly, they are. It's hard for people to give up the convenience of processed food, says McMill. Hard is relative. Because remember, you're talking to the crappiest of crappy garbage, junk food, convenience food, diet eater you've probably ever met. I mean, I would literally go over to that store right over there, and I would buy several 12-packs of Coca-Cola every single day. And I would drink 16 cans of Coke. Now, that's not an addict. I don't know what it is. I would also get the 10 for $10 boxes of Little Debbie snack cakes, which I check every once in a while. All these years later, it's still 10 for $10 Little Debbie snack cakes. And I'd eat 2 boxes at a time. I would go over and get fast food. The Taco Bell's over there. I'd go to the McDonald's over there. It's so amazing. I don't even think about those things until I stop and reflect back on what my life was like over 15 years ago and how I ate and how I didn't really care about my health. And keto saved that. Low-carb keto saved my life. And so if I get passionate on these Jimmy rants, you got to always remember the context of where I've come from and why I'm so adamant today with what I believe. Because I know people still are caught in that whole idea that they're stuck where they are and that they're doing everything right and nothing's working, blah, blah, blah. There is an answer. They're just not getting it. BB says, since going keto, not once have I felt starved. Quite the opposite. Ever, ever, ever. I'm never hungry. Yeah, it just doesn't happen when you eat adequate fat and calories. I read an article last night. A woman reversed her dementia by eating keto. Kimberly, that's very hard to do because I know Dr. David Perlmutter says once you have dementia, it's very difficult to reverse it. I believe it. And some of the early onset Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and that kind of thing, I've heard keto can be a very effective strategy. I would definitely love to see that article if you want to send that to me. Every animal has micronutrients in their body. I hate the person who wrote that article. Yeah, Alberto, it is sad that they're able to put that into an article and people are like, yeah, there's no nutrients at all in meat. And I'm going, we have such a disinformation campaign about food going on. And it's predicated on people's lack of education about what food and what nutrient density is in food. In my book, Real Food Keto, there is so much information about exactly what nutrients are in what foods that are keto friendly. Please get a copy of that. If you don't believe me, we go through every single micronutrient and we tell you what is good in there as far as the micronutrients go for every single food that you could consume on your keto diet. Ashton says, if I'm going to die, then let me die eating steak smothered in bacon. Hello, Nancy. Thanks for being here. Olga says, we're all going to die, but I'm hoping to fit into a regular sized coffin. Yeah. That's funny. Let's see here. People will respond with what they believe the researchers want. They want to get the answers right, says Ketogenic Nurse. That's the other thing about these surveys. They can literally write down anything they want. And sometimes they'll say, well, they don't know what I had, so let me tell them what they want to hear. So, of course, I had quinoa. Of course, I had oatmeal and orange. And then they really had bacon and eggs, right? That is where it all falls apart. Nancy says, if we get too healthy, who will profit? Bottom line, keeps people afraid to eat for health and keep us sick to finance Big Pharma and Big Food Corp. Yeah, you're all over it, Nancy. You know. Texas Livingston says, on a news channel here in Texas, a cardiologist came on, said keto is dangerous and led to starvation and high blood pressure because of the fat. He must have been the one that wrote this cockamamie article. But see, here's the thing, you guys. You have to know this. Behind the scenes, the vegans are so ticked off that keto has gotten a foothold because they have been able to get their propaganda out there. And they did it through this article that I talked about here today. But they have been methodically working behind the scenes. Guys, you have no idea how ticked off they are about the keto movement. They are so ticked off. And this is the way they respond. And that cardiologist, I'm pretty sure I know who it is that you're referring to, Texas Livingston. They're not happy at all. Don't tell me his name is Garth Davis. Is that right? So Garth Davis is down there in Texas, and he commonly goes on the television to spew his vegan propaganda. And I don't think people are buying it anymore. That's what makes this so fun. Yesterday I made a new vegan friend blasting me all over, says Dory. Friend Dory, yes. Healthy Bishop, more meat and butter without carbs lowers my blood pressure. It does it like a champ every single time, doesn't it? John does keto. This is a much needed Jimmy rant this morning. Preach it, brother. Thank you. Keto does not elevate blood pressure, but reports like this will. Yeah, I'm fired up today, you guys. I'm on the mend from a cold I've been having, but I had to come on video and rant about this because this is just, it's too much to allow to go out there and nobody respond to it. I will always respond to this kind of stuff. Jen says, love your rants. Thank you. Tall redhead, if meat was bad, mankind would have been wiped out thousands of years ago. That's the thing nobody ever talks about either. How did we get to today? How did we get here? Because we've only had agriculture for about 10,000 years. So if all of these things, which are predicated on agriculture, beans, whole grains, vegetables, blah, 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 if all of that is supposedly healthy and helping us live a long life and survive and blah, 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 how did we get here? How did our hunter-gatherer ancestors survive without their precious quinoa and oats and fruits and vegetables and beans when they didn't have any such thing? Does that make any common sense that they would survive if meat and dairy and all these other things were totally unhealthy for them? No, that's how they survived. Meat is what helped them get to the point in their lives where we now live here today. Think that through. Awesome rant. Thank you, Bonnie. Appreciate you being here. Ketoholic says, yay, Jimmy, love you. Tell them like it is. We need this too so we can help defend keto. Well, and I don't always feel the need to defend keto. Sometimes people will say, you need to respond to this 45-minute video. And I'm like, I'm not listening to that video. I'm not watching that stupid video. There's always going to be antagonists of keto. You just have to know that. I've been online for 15 years. I have seen every bit of antagonism you've ever seen against this way of eating. And at the end of the day, some battles are worth responding to, and others, just let them blah, 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 blah. It is what it is. Now, if you're Jillian Michaels and you're out there saying a bunch of crap about keto, I'm going to call you out on it. If you write a stupid article like we talked about here today that's getting a lot of people upset, I'm going to talk about it. But if you're just some no-name idiot trying to get your name in the paper because you said something bad about keto, yawn. I'm not going to respond to that. Jay Moyer likes that I said, you can't just speak that into existence, 100%. Brett says, until I adopted low-carb, high-fat, I have never, ever had normal or even low blood pressure in my adult life. Nurses would look at me like a walking corpse. Mike says, my diabetic doctor told me I needed carbs for my brain. Well, your diabetic doctor needs to eat a few more carbs if he thinks that helps his brain health, because that's stupid. Let's see here. More nurses are on keto than you will ever know. I'm sure, MB Nedley, that's true. I'm sure that's very true. And that's the sad part. Most in the medical profession recognize the benefits of keto, but because of some of the limitations, the pharmaceutical influence, so many factors at play, they can't always articulate it. And that's disgusting. Ketoholic, yes, I've never not eaten food out of a box or a sealed bag, and now I eat real whole foods. Don't even go down those aisles anymore. No, when I go into a grocery store, unless I'm just like looking at like what's happening in the food culture trend, I'll do that every once in a while. I generally stay around the outer edges, and that's it. I don't ever go to the center unless I'm getting like coconut oil or some very specific ingredient. I always stick around the outer edges. Love your passion. Thank you, Keto Fasting. Appreciate that. Love of animals. Grain crops are almost sterile land. No animal in many square miles, but family farms are full of life and fuel the ecosystem, says Alberto. Yep. I wish I could remember which preacher I saw on TV. He was spouting the key to the ketogenic diet and had a doctor on faith base. Totally keto. I was so pleased to see this side. I think I got most of that, Russ. You must be doing talk to text because there was a lot of weird words in there. But yeah, people are talking about this. And you got people that are truly keto evangelists, so to speak. And then you've got other people that are saying, hey, keto is what everybody's talking about. Let me throw an anti-keto thing in there so they pay attention to me. You just got to know that's what's happening right now. I was sent this same article by my sister-in-law yesterday, was wondering how to respond in love. I really want her to understand, says Kathy. Well, I don't know about the in love, other than you hear everything I shared here today, because I get kind of ranty on these Jimmy rants, but hopefully it arms you with enough good information that you could maybe counter. The hard part is there's some people that aren't ready for the keto message, and you have to be okay with that. Not everybody's going to embrace it like you did. Hunter-gatherers had no fridge, no ice. They ate when they killed an animal and ate again probably 3 days later. And in the meantime, had little vegetation, that they would gather and long periods of fasting. We don't talk about that a lot, but that does matter, and it did happen. You're preaching the way you will make us all healthy. Naysayers can say anything. The keto revolution is here to stay, says Polly. Yep. Big Food does not want us to think about the past. How should we live without them? Yeah, for sure. Debbie says, I'm reading Keto Clarity. Love this book. Thank you for reading my book. We're coming up on the 5-year anniversary that book came out. So really happy it's still changing people's lives. MK says, our daughter is a vegan. I just stay quiet. We all have to do what's best for ourselves and support each other. She supports me 100% on my journey for better health. Well, that's great. That's really great. And I'm all for supporting someone who chooses to eat vegan if that's making them healthy and they're happy with it. What I don't like is when a vegan tells me, well, you need to be eating the same way that I am to get the same results. That's not cool. Canada government is pushing the vegan diet to the world. This is going to go worldwide. Well, I did a whole Jimmy Rants all on that, Alberto, recently, so go back and find that one. But no, it's not going to happen. If Jimmy Moore has anything to say about it, and Dr. Sean Baker and some of us who are doing kind of more of a carnivorous style diet, bring it. Bring it. Because they're not going to know what hit them. And our brains are going to be a lot better fueled than their brains. Just try to make me a vegan. Go ahead. Go ahead. Make my day. Marilyn, you have a general question. And we don't answer general questions on these Jimmy Rants, although I did do a Q&A just yesterday. So if you need to have that question about bipolar and schizophrenia, please email me, jimmy@llvlc.com. And I actually recently interviewed somebody on that very subject on the Livin' La Vida Low Carb show. So email me. I will send you the link to that, or you can just go find it on llvlc.com. Type in bipolar and you will find that episode. But guys, the bottom line of this Jimmy Rants is you're going to see a lot of horrible stuff that shows up in the media from time to time. And you just have to know about keto. You just have to know this is par for the course. Hashtag we are winning. If they have to pull that kind of stuff. So don't be discouraged. Feel free to go ahead and send them to me if you want to when you see that. But just know this is normal. Because they are scared to death, which is why they're trying to scare you away from long-term low-carb keto, telling you you're going to die from it. Bring on the Grim Reaper, because it ain't happening. All right, guys, that's it for this episode of Jimmy Rants. JimmyRants.com is the website. As always, we start off on Instagram. Go follow me there at Livin' Low Carb Man, LIVIN LOWCARBMAN. You can engage in the content live, just like all this spirited group here did this morning. If you missed the live, you can watch it on replay for up to 24 hours. After 24 hours, it does disappear from Instagram. We pop all the past episodes up on YouTube. So go follow me on YouTube, type in Jimmy Rants, and you will find the show. Finally, we have a Jimmy Rants podcast, which has the best of the best moments of this here show in podcast form. JimmyRants.com is the website with links to all of that. So until next time, we'll see you then.